Hi, I'm William.
And I'm Kat,
That must mean this is info on the go.
answering questions you want to know. Well, William, what are we talking about today?
Let's talk about the Mason-Dixon line. At least that's what I researched. How about you?
That sounds like a good plan to me.
No, I'm just
I've always
playing.
heard, below the Mason-Dixon line. What
Yeah,
does that mean?
and we're going to dive a little bit into that. And if you listen to our episode about Delaware, we left out the Mason-Dixon line. Delaware is a direct product of the Mason-Dixon line. Um,
Ah,
so I guess we have to go back just a little bit here to talk about the Mason-Dixon line. In 1732, the proprietary governor of Maryland, Charles Colvin,
proprietary.
proprietary,
Proprietary.
the proprietary governor of Maryland, Charles Calvert, 5th Baron Baltimore, signed an agreement with William Penn Sons, which drew a line somewhere between Maryland and Pennsylvania. But later, Lord Baltimore claimed that the document he signed did not contain the terms that he agreed to and refused to put the agreement into effect. Beginning in the mid 1730s, violence erupted between settlers, claiming various loyalties to Maryland and Pennsylvania. The border conflict between Pennsylvania and Maryland would be known as Sepsis War.
Say that again.
Creps, Crepsis
Cri-
War? Sepsis?
Chrysips,
Cressips.
maybe?
Oh,
Cresap. Cresap.
okay.
Cresap? Hmm.
Cresap. It's an actual guy. I was gonna include him in here, but there's a lot on this guy.
Oh, man.
Uh, yeah, well,
So,
he deserves a whole show on his own.
fair enough. Hostilities erupted in 1730 with a series of violent incidents prompted by disputes over property rights and law enforcement. The conflict escalated through the first half of the decade, culminating in the development of military forces by Maryland in 1736 and by Pennsylvania in 1737. The armed phase of the conflict ended in May 1738 with the intervention of King George II, who compelled the negotiation of a ceasefire.
King George II reigned from 1727 to 1760, during which the dispute over the boundary intensified. In particular, he inherited the colonial boundary disagreements from his predecessor. As king, he ultimately had to approve the agreements made between the Penn and the Colvert families to resolve the matter.
Um, and somehow my inner brain was like, well, why is the king involved if this is in the United States? And then my other half of other half of my brain was like, because we weren't officially hitting the revolution until 1776. So I was like, oh, yes,
Yes, which is
rational
why the
brain.
king was involved. And uh, these two families, I mean, like this was pretty wild. Not
Right,
not that
right.
they had claim on it, because there was other people here before. Anyway, you can go ahead.
I digress. The Penn and Calvert families, under the pressure to settle the issue, petitioned the Crown for intervention. While King George II did not directly resolve the dispute, the royal authority upheld agreements that allowed the families to commission a survey. The Mason-Dixon Line is a historical boundary in the United States that originally served to resolve a border dispute between the colonies of Maryland, Pennsylvania, and Delaware. It was surveyed between 1763 and 1767 by Charles Mason and Jeremiah Dixon, two English astronomers and surveyors. Dang, surveyors. The line became famous as a symbolic division between the northern free states and the southern slave states before and during the Civil War era.
So while King George II passed away, he basically died before the surveyors ever began. He died in 1760, and the surveyors, Mason and Dixon, didn't start surveying until 1763.
Dang.
It was like, and you see, it took 4 years to survey.
Right. Yep.
A crownstone boundary monument on the Mason-Dixon line. These markers were originally placed at every fifth mile or 8 kilometers along the line. Adornmented,
Oh, you got it right the last time. Ornamented.
ornamented with family coats of arms facing the state they represented. So the coat of arms for Maryland's founding state would face Maryland. The Calvert family that represented William Penn's, who founded the province of Pennsylvania, would be facing Pennsylvania.
So, what exactly are these markers? Mason and Dixon used stone markers to demarcate the boundary they surveyed, which are still significant historical artifacts today. These stones were specifically quarried and brought from England for their durability and uniformity. The key details about the markers.
I think we're both struggling with small words. Um,
Right.
the material, the stone was made of a durable limestone. They were chosen for their resistance to weathering, ensuring the line remained visible over time. And as you said earlier, the limestone is basically used in all kind of things like the pyramids and
Uh,
other structures.
Aqueducts. They were used for aqueducts out in Egypt somewhere too.
And I think it was malleable. I think it was really easier to mine than some of the other stones. If
Mm.
I'm not mistaken, the original plans for the White House, the cornerstone in it is a limestone. Don't hold me
Hmm.
to that. I have to look at that. The size of these crown stones, each marker was about was about 3 to 5 feet tall, with a portion of it being buried underground for stability. Smaller intermediate stones were placed every mile with larger crown stones, and the larger crown stones were placed every 5 miles. And as we mentioned earlier, one side of the stone had the coat of arms of the Penn family, representing Pennsylvania. The other side had the coat of arms of the Calvert family, representing Maryland. These designs symbolized the resolution of the colonial boundary dispute between the two families. Placement. These stones were placed, like we said, every mile along the boundary. Crownstone marked every 5 miles surveying as key reference points. So basically, they would use smaller stones every mile. Still, that's a good distance to be on foot. The smaller stones. Like you
Right.
couldn't really, I guess if it was cleared out, you could see those stones. You could
Right.
definitely probably see have you ever been to Pennsylvania or Maryland?
I've been to Connecticut
Oh,
and Massachusetts.
I want to say that I saw one of these crown stones, but I'm not 100% sure. Anyway, we'll
I
get back to
wonder
this.
I wonder if we could find a picture of one. That'd be neat.
Okay, you go ahead. I will see if I can find one.
All right. Surveying tools. Mason and Dixon used astronomical tools like quadrants and zenith sectors to ensure precision in determining latitude and direction. The stones were placed based on these measurements, which is a feat. Like oof. Mason and Dixon failed to measure the entire length of the south boundary of Pennsylvania as determined by its charter. In the summer of 1767, the surveying party crossed the oh man, I just Mon Mahu Monongahela Monongahela River and the Great Catawba Warpath.
Catawba.
Yeah, I looked these up on purpose and still was really trying hard not to butcher them. So I
And look,
apologize.
I finally got to tell you one.
Yeah. Oh, nice. Those are pretty neat, actually, and they did really stand up to time.
I'm certain that while we were in Maryland, I saw one of these crown stones, and uh, I mean, yeah, and when we get down to the bottom of the episode, we're going to talk a little bit about preservation of these.
Yeah. Okay, so the warpath, violating a treaty limiting the westward expansion of English settlements. Not wishing to risk inciting native hostilities, Mason and Dixon were forced to return east after making their final observations at the crest of Brown's Hill.
On November 14th, 1963, during the bicentennial of the Mason-Dixon Line, U.S. President John F. Kennedy opened a newly completed section of Interstate 95 where it crossed the Maryland Delaware border. After the president, flanked by governors of Delaware and Maryland, cut a ribbon opening the interstate, they moved to the grassy median strip where a replica of the Mason-Dixon marker had been placed for the bicentennial. There, President Kennedy and the governors unveiled a limestone replica. It was one of the last public appearances before his assassination in Dallas, Texas. The Delaware Turnpike and the Maryland portion of the new road were later designated as the John F. Kennedy Memorial Highway. Wow, that is significant on its own, right?
Right. Well, you were reading it, and then I had to go back and reread it because I was like, wait, what?
Yeah, it was one
President
of
Kennedy.
his last public appearances before his assassination.
Dang. I don't know. President Kennedy came out of nowhere for me, so I had to like, wait,
Yeah.
where did that come from? In 2020, 30 volunteers at the behest of the Maryland Geological Survey started a project to locate and document the 226 remaining Mason-Dixon limestones, which replaced every mile, like we talked about, in the 18th century to mark the border between Pennsylvania and Maryland. The stones are historically significant because they represent one of the first
Geodetic.
geodetic. Wow, you got to tell me another one.
I'm on a roll, man.
Yeah, the geodetic surveys ever conducted in North America. I would not have said it like that. I was like, okay, geode, tick. Doesn't sound right. Anyway, the volunteers hope to get the stones listed on the National Register of Historic Places, which will help to preserve them for future generations. At this recording, the volunteers have found 218 of the often hidden 500-pound limestone markers quarried in England. That, woof.
Think about that. They had man, there was no trains or anything like that.
What? You just had
500 pounds. And they placed 226 of these. They were shipped from England to the to then Maryland.
the colonies.
Yeah. Well, I don't even think it was the Well, yeah, it was the colonies then.
Yeah.
But man, could you imagine having to tote those things around?
Tote? Hell no. They had to have a good wagon.
I'm sure they had something.
Heck no. Maybe I should say heck no. Anyway, heck no.
Yeah. Here are some key points about the Mason-Dixon line geography. It runs east-west, forming the southern border of Pennsylvania and the northern border of Maryland. It extends westward from Delaware border and also involves the 12-mile circle, a unique boundary involving Delaware. And that 12-mile circle is it, it it is hard to explain how that works. Symbolism. While originally a colony boundary, the Mason-Dixon line became widely associated with the division between the North and South in the context of slavery and sectional conflict. And so when you hear about the Mason-Dixon line, that's really what they're talking about. But as we talked about in our episode of Delaware, Delaware was a slave state,
Right.
but sympathized, like a lot of the people in Delaware sympathized with the abolition of slavery, while some, like it was a divided state, right?
Mm-hmm. It was very wishy-washy.
Yeah.
I guess. Oof. So the surveying achievement. The line was a technical achievement of its time using advanced astronomical and mathematical techniques for precise surveying. Today, the Mason-Dixon line remains a cultural reference point for regional divisions in the United States.
And with that being said, that will conclude this up. Do you have anything else you want to add, Kat, about the
N-
Mason-Dixon line?
No, I mean not really. It is very fascinating though. Like I didn't realize that it was an actual line. I thought it was just a figure of speech, but of course, I guess almost all figures of speech come from somewhere.
Absolutely.
Uh,
And like I said, Delaware came out of the Mason-Dixon line surveying. Um, and man, can you imagine? Like, I hope those volunteers find the remaining stones that they're missing.
but right. No, that's pretty cool. That's awesome
Yep,
because that's history for sure.
absolutely.
And just from the picture that I'm looking at that you put in here, it really did hold up pretty well, like better than a lot of headstones.
For sure. If you, when you're not driving or when you have time, Google Mason-Dixon crown stones, and you'll get plenty of pictures to look at them and see the coat of arms. I'm pretty sure the coat of arms are kind of worn over the years, but it's still visible enough to be able to tell what it was.
Yeah. Net well, uh, kind of. Okay.
Kinda. Yeah, kinda. Some, I'm sure the replica will be the best one to look at to see exactly what it looked like.
Yeah, what their coat of arms looks like. I mean, because this looks like a circle with some dots. A fancy they have,
Uh,
but
with that
yes.
with that being said, that will conclude this episode of Info on the Go. We are a new podcast. Please follow us on Facebook. Get us wherever you get your podcast. Make sure you follow us, like us, leave us a review, and who knows, maybe Cat will read it.
Yes. And if you give us material, well, maybe not material, but um
Things you want to know?
yes, give us things you want to know,
Give
random
us some show
questions.
ideas. Yeah. Ask us questions. We'll definitely
If we have to go in more detail and you have questions about specific things within the episode, absolutely ask. We'll try to find an answer.
for sure. All right. With that being said, this is Info on the Go.
Have a great